Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. In this video, I'm going to go over my review of SETI. So this is a tabletop simulator version of it, but I will say that I own this game. I went against what I usually do, and I purchased this game without having played it, only having learned it, or I should say, heard about it and learned very vaguely what this game was about. And so it was much of a surprise to me as it might be to you, but so I went out of my way to get this game because it had received a lot of good feedback from players, and it seemed like it was up my alley of what kind of game I would be interested in. And this game is really good, so let's get into why. But to go over the game as an overview, what we're trying to do is, as the name implies, we are searching the galaxy for signs of life. And in this Euro game adaptation or abstraction of that concept, you are taking actions, of which there are many, which include launching probes from Earth, moving them around the solar system, to land on planets or moons or to orbit them, also playing cards from your hand to make these actions a little bit easier to do. You're acquiring technologies that make your actions easier. You're scanning the sky for data points or pieces of data that you can put onto your board and analyze, all of which leads to gaining 3 different kinds of resources, the signs of life, as I call them. You place them onto your these flipped alien boards until one of each color is full, and then you flip over 2 of these 5 randomized aliens midway through the game. These give you extra abilities to score points, as well as different cards and opportunities to, once again, score even more points. Games of this usually go up into the 100+ range of points. You do this over 5 rounds, and you go back and forth taking a main action until all people pass who are playing the game, and whoever has the most points after 5 rounds wins. So that's a basic overview of what this game is all about. So moving on to some board game comparisons, there are 2 that I want to make. First is another CGE game, Lost Ruins of Arnak, which is a very popular game, of course. Now, I did not know this ahead of time when I learned this game, and it makes sense now. Some people have made this comparison to Arnak in that the round structure is very similar, where you have all of these different actions and puzzles, kind of like you're solving a puzzle with those actions and the cards that you have in your hand, which are multi-use, by the way. And you have a very open-ended approach to what you can do on your turn and to when a round officially ends. You take turns and go as far as you can, doing actions as efficiently as possible to extend the amount of time that you have to get as many points as you can. And so it very much felt like Lost Ruins of Arnak, instead of having a board where you place out workers and explore a board and flip over tiles. In this game, and also you have a kind of a track that you're progressing through as you turn in resources in Arnak, as opposed to in SETI, where you have a board where you are moving probes around and racing other people towards the planets before they can, which is, I guess, very similar to the worker placement board of Arnak. But instead of a track that you're moving up, you are, I guess, essentially focusing on moving your probes around that board, playing cards, taking different actions, more of like an area control type of experience with scanning as well. And so the decision space ultimately felt very much like Arnak did when I first played it. Very open-ended and lots of actions to take. And, it took a lot of time to really figure out what I wanted to do and how best to progress through the action selections, the selection of actions that I had on each turn to maximize the amount that I could do on my turns. And the second game I want to compare is Arc Nova. Now, both games have a large deck of individualized cards, which is very appealing and part of the reason why I decided to buy SETI in the first place. But I will say that these games feel very different, and it kind of alludes to the decision space that surrounds how you take actions. In SETI, you have a very wide amount of different actions plus free actions that you can take. I don't know off the top of my head what those actions are or how many there are, but there's like 8, somewhere between 5 and 8 different actions that you can take, plus another 5 free actions or so, right? In addition to all the different cards that you can play for actions as well. So the decisions that you have in this game are very variable, right? Versus in Arc Nova, it branches off from 5 actions that you can take. Arc Nova I've always thought was like a meteor version of Wingspan, where it's easy to understand where you can launch off to take an action, right? Okay, I have 5 different action cards that I can choose from. They all vary in the power that you can do so, and so some actions are going to be better on certain turns than others, but the decisions really come from what can I do with what I have now and make the most of it to create an engine and get my ball rolling with points, right? And so Arc Nova feels a little bit more restricted in what you can accomplish, and you're trying to just get by as efficiently as possible, whereas in SETI, it feels a lot more open, and it's up to you to kind of find those most efficient paths yourself with more, I guess, variables and data points, right, to choose from. So each game does offer some variability, a lot of variability with different cards and whatnot, but the way that you take actions and the way that I feel it makes you feel as a player from turn to turn is a lot different in the scope of what is available to do. So moving on to the peer review, of which there were a lot of comments. I didn't go through all of them, but I tried to summarize what I found on Board Game Geek for those who have already played this game. And to summarize what I found here, people really enjoyed the production of this game in physical format, the thematic integration as well. I feel like the designer, Tomas Holek, really put a lot of thought and effort into making this game play very smoothly, but also be very close to what it might actually be like to explore space as we do now and to discover life out there. So a lot of people enjoyed that, and I'll have more to say on that later. People thought this was a pretty strategic game and really enjoyed the alien introduction element of this game. About halfway through or so, like I mentioned before, you do alter how the game might be played and offer different ways that this game might be approached. Another game that I failed to mention at this time, or at the time that I spoke about the aliens, was Newsfjord. There's my Rosenberg pick for the video. So Newsfjord introduces those endgame sea buildings near the end of the game, like about 2/3 of the way through. And so it offers you a few different tantalizing options to pursue before, and they offer to you privately before offering it publicly to everyone. And so I'll save my comparisons and thoughts for that later too. But some people did have some issues with the game. It is pretty lengthy, and one part that makes this game lengthy is the same potential issue that you would find in a game like Arnak, where the fact, or even like games like Everdell, where the fact that if someone ends their turn earlier and has used up all their resources, they may be sitting there watching other people play their turns out for an extended amount of time. And so it does not automatically have an equal turn structure per se for everyone. And so that might help or hurt people by helping them, or I guess making them feel like they're missing out. Some other things that people found issues with are the resource constraints. I think some people, especially at higher player counts, found that there weren't a lot of resources enough in the game box to go around, and the randomness as well. Sometimes you get the right cards that you need to really turn your strategy into something more efficient than your neighbor, whereas they have no other potential comeback to compete with you. Overall, though, a lot of people commented on the strong replayability, and variability, I think, plays a big factor in that, with a large deck of cards, the potential for alien expansion content as well, in addition to expanding other things like text and cards, was a highlight of this game and something that people would look forward to and probably found meaningful as they played the game and thought of the potential benefit of having the game for future content to make this game even more replayable down the road. Very similar to another very thematic game in Terraforming Mars, which shares a lot of the DNA with this game as well. I feel like that game has had a lot of, it has legs to be very replayable nearly 10 years later because of the additional expansion content in a very, added onto a very variable and, exploratory type of game as a base. And so, this game obviously has that same potential to be replayable with the content that you have now, but also in the future. So a lot of people like that as well. So getting into my final ratings, and I've listed them out here already for you to look at. Overall, 8.7, a very good, enjoyable game. So I'll go through these one by one. So rules and gameplay, I felt like the rules were easy enough to learn. There are still some instances where I did turn to the game rules, especially with my first play, as I had tried to internalize the rules beforehand. And when it came, time to play, I was a little overwhelmed with all the choices that I had at first, right? Like I said, it's not as easy or straightforward as Ark Nova is in terms of what you can do on your turn. In this game, it took a little bit more of, a learning curve to learn what you could actually do, and then it became a little bit more strategic. Now, for strategic avenues, how diverse could each game be from game to game in which you score points? I feel like you have a pretty equal opportunity to score a lot of points, whether you really focus on scanning the solar system or sending out probes to land or orbit planets, or then focusing on those aliens as they come out as well mid-game. There are a lot of different ways to really, diversify, focus in on one area, or kind of have a combination. I think you can be pretty successful with either of those. And in the games that I've played, I feel like I've been able to have a diverse game from game to game. And there are a lot of other variables that affect this. In addition to the different aliens, you have the different end game goals here that are in yellow, as well as the different text that you acquire throughout the game, as well as the cards that you have to play with. And so, yes, I do feel like there are a lot of different ways you can explore and be successful in this game, which I appreciate. Although it does, going down to skill ceiling, I feel like this isn't as skillful as a game as Ark Nova is, or even like Terraforming Mars. I think this game, while it's very interesting and broad in how you can acquire points, I don't feel like there is much of an ability to really, get better at this game. I think it's more in the game-to-game ability to recognize what the most optimal plays are going to be. In games like Ark Nova, Agricola, there are certain ways that you approach the game that utilize a lot of skill and repetition to understand what is the best move and when is it right to deviate from that in kind of a sequential order, right? There are certain things that you should do in the early game of Ark Nova and then pivot to continue your engine of points building up throughout the rest of the game, and that is variable based off, once again, the cards as well as the map that you're playing, etc. In SETI, it feels a little bit more tactical in nature, where you're really going off of just what the cards you have in your hand are allowing you to do more efficiently, as well as what the board state looks like. And so I feel like there is an opportunity to be skillful in this game, but not to the same degree as very competitive games, I feel like Ark Nova, Terra Mystica, Dune, etc. Now, back up to thematic integration, this game is very thematic. I think this is one of the most thematic games that I've played, where every single card, it reminds me of Ark Nova. Well, no, not even that. Like, it reminds me more of Terraforming Mars and Wingspan, where the cards themselves, and Agricola, of course, the cards are very thematic. Everyone feels like they've been tailored with care to represent what technology or event in history that has led to us going to the stars and looking for extraterrestrial life. And there are there's flavor text on the bottom of each card, which is amazing. And so you have the cards, right? You have the board. One of the coolest things is this board where as you take certain actions in the game and as it progresses, the board will rotate and affect how your probe is located in the solar system, and how its movement might affect the solar system's movement, might affect the movement of your own probes. It can either help or hinder you based off of what is going on, and essentially the effects of your actions as well as your opponents. And so it's very thematic. The middle part spins as faster than the outer parts does, as it does in the solar system anyway. And so this central board is fantastic. I think this is one of my favorite, if not my most favorite part of the game. I love the aliens as well. There are probably thematic integrations about those aliens that maybe are not like fantastical, but more predictable based off of the science and what we know already. So I really enjoy that as well. And so this whole amalgamation of this game, as far as the theme is concerned, is a masterpiece in my opinion. Doesn't make it the most skillful game, probably not, but it does make it very thematic and very enjoyable to learn more. I just felt like I was learning more about space and science, astronomy, than it reminded me of going to college back in the day and taking my astronomy course then. So if I could get that while still having fun playing a thematic board game, Euro game rather, then that is a plus, right? And that's why I think this is a very fun game. It's got a lot of replayability. It does miss out on the opportunity to have more alien species to mix up the mid game. And just like with Ark Nova and the different maps, you have like 10 maps in the base game. It'd be so cool. And I understand that in SETI the aliens really do affect how this game will play, and so there's a lot more that goes into making those aliens than perhaps there would be for maps. But with additional content, that replayability will just increase, and the variability is already there. And I think that it's those aliens that I feel like just misses out, a little bit. For the solo mode, it was a pretty interesting solo. You flip over a card, do an action that you can, with the card itself. And there are different ways to upgrade the difficulty with different objectives, etc. And so I thought the solo mode was well implemented and very fun to do. It really simulates the actual multiplayer game pretty well. And I really enjoy the interaction in this game. I think in addition to interacting with the central board, not only in the movement of probes when you do rotate the solar system, but also for vying for area control for these stars around the solar system. If you're scanning for data and placing your own personal markers on those stars, whoever has the most when that little data spot is filled, will get some benefits there, right? And so there's a little bit of an area control type of competition going on in the main board. And so there's a lot of interaction there. There's a lot of interaction for the planets themselves to send probes there as quickly as you can. Interaction for racing for milestones and placing your markers on these endgame placeholders or markers, racing for techs, racing for the different alien bonuses as well. Lots of different races. And so it feels like terraforming Mars in that regard. And so it's a really delicious race type of interaction in this game. So overall, a fantastic game, one that I enjoy and am pleased to have in my collection physically, and will continue to explore this game and see if the skill ceiling does improve over time, if there is an element of mastery to this game to the same degree that I would hope for it to have, similar in vein to games like Ark Nova and Agricola. But even if it doesn't have it, I think this is still a really fun game to pull out and play and just have fun with, right? So those are my thoughts and my review on SETI. Thank you for consulting with me today, and hope you schedule an appointment with me real soon. Take care.